Welcome to Empathy Empire. I'm Kim Smiley. My guest today is Dr. Faith Banks, a Toronto veterinarian and the founder of Midtown Mobile Veterinary Hospice Services. Faith is among the first group of veterinarians to be named as a certified hospice and palliative care veterinarian. Her goal in providing compassionate in-home palliative hospice and end-of-life care is to allow people to strengthen and lengthen the bond they share with their beloved pets. I am so happy you're here. Welcome, Dr. Faith Banks, to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So you are a clinical hospice and palliative care veterinarian, is that correct?
Yes. I graduated from Guelph, from OVC in 1996, and went into general practice as a regular veterinarian. And then about 10 years ago, I was certified as a hospice and palliative care vet.
Okay, so we were talking before the podcast that 7 years ago, I featured you and your story and the incredible work that you do on day 26 of the Empathy Effect. And one of the things that I wrote about was that when people think of hospice, they usually think of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think of animals, but you have completely revolutionized that in the whole veterinarian world. So I want to talk to you about how that happened. I know that Smudge, your dog, your beloved dog,
Yeah.
was part of the inspiration for that. Can you walk us through that?
Sure.
How that came to be?
Yep, sure. So Smudge was born in 2000. She was a Bernese Mountain Dog, and she lived to the ripe old age of 14, which is very, very old for a dog. It's very old for a dog, but even crazier for a Bernese Mountain Dog to live to that age. But anyways, as she was aging, I saw all the issues that she was having, and I was working in a veterinary practice in downtown Toronto at the time. And just all of the things that we had to sort of care for her with. So she had mobility issues, she was pooping in the house, she was waking us at night, and just sort of becoming anxious. And so I just started researching a little bit more about geriatric care and pain management. And I stumbled across an article on animal hospice, and I was like blown away. And I knew right away that's what I wanted to do. So I shifted the way that I practiced, and I opened up a service. It was just me at that time, about 10 years ago, and I provided in-home care to all these older pets that were sort of declining at home and not really coming into the clinic so much because it was so hard for them to get there, whether it was hard because the owners couldn't bring them there or it was just so stressful for the pets. But I started going into people's homes to help care for them. And one of the things that I started doing more and more was to help families say goodbye at home. So providing the service of in-home euthanasia.
So this didn't exist at all in Toronto at the time?
Well, it had existed in the sense that there were mobile vets back then. And one of the things that they did was in-home euthanasia. But I really focused on just the care for geriatric pets or pets that were facing a terminal illness. And so it was just more focused on that. So I wasn't providing routine care. I wasn't doing vaccines. I wasn't, just the sort of regular stuff that happens to pets on a regular basis. I wasn't doing that. I was really just focusing on caring for them at the end, and also helping owners understand how their pets are doing and what to expect, and to help prepare them for saying goodbye.
And is it dogs and cats exclusively, or is it any pet that you would help give a dignified death at home?
We see mostly dogs and cats, but we certainly are able to help bunnies and small, we call them pocket pets, and some exotics as well, but mostly dogs and cats.
Would you call yourself an empathetic person?
I think so.
I think so too. That was a leading question. So have you always been a lover of animals since you were a little kid?
I have. My parents had bought me this little book that you put in like pictures and you write, when you're in grade 1, my best friend is, and when I grow up, I want to be. And, every year it was the same thing, that I wanted to be a vet.
Since you were a little girl?
Since I was little.
Wow, that is beautiful. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, we were talking before a little bit about the fact that I've always been fascinated with death since I was a little girl. And so I've studied a lot about death, like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and all different people who deal with death and dying. So I was interested really to interview you because I kind of started to question what are the parallels when we're talking about dealing with animals and death. I don't have an animal, but like often when I see you, I always think of getting a dog. Like after I interact, I don't know, you have that effect on me. But I wanted to talk to you about what are the similarities and the parallels with human beings and how we deal with death with dignity and euthanasia with human beings, and then what are some of the differences? So let's start with some of the parallels.
So I think there are so many. I think that pets are family and we treat them as such. And sometimes we probably treat them better than other family members. I have I have people that tell me they love their pets more than they love their children sometimes, and certainly their husbands on some days. And so they are so loved. And it is unconditional love to their pet and from their pet. And so the feelings that they have are the same as you would have towards a loved family member. And so we treat them as such. And so when we lose that pet, and it's in a short time, like we start with the pet as a baby to a geriatric in the span of maybe 15 years. So we see their entire life so quickly. But people are so bonded to them. And so when there is loss or potential loss, it hits really, really hard. And I do have people tell me that they grieved more for the loss of a pet than they did for the loss of an older sibling or a parent, which really shocks people. Doesn't shock me so much when I hear that now, but people are very shocked by their feelings of attachment and the bond that they have, and it's pretty amazing.
It seems like it's a very unconditional bond that people have with their pets, like an unconditional love.
Absolutely. I mean, you're not having fights with your pet and you're not having disagreements, and they might do something that you didn't agree with, but you kind of move on from that. But there are no hard feelings that are lasting, no family dramas that are happening, and so it's pure love.
One of the things I've noticed just being around animals, because I have a lot of friends with pets, is that I find that animals have a very high sense of attunement to emotions. Like they can sense the emotional vibrations in a home better often than people can. So it's like their empathy attunement is very, very sharp. I don't know if that's just dogs and cats. I notice it more in dogs than cats. Is there something you can say to that?
Yeah, I would say I agree with that 100%. I mean, if you had to put me on the spot and if I had to say dogs, cats more, I'd probably say more with the dogs. But they know sort of the normal baseline, and they can tell when people are upset. I've seen with my son, I remember one day not that long ago, he was upset about something, I think that happened on the soccer field, and our dog was all over him.
It's like a radar.
Yeah, they feel it. I mean, maybe we give off a different smell, maybe our actions are different, but they are definitely in tune with people and they react to it in a positive way.
The other thing I've noticed is that when people are ill or when people are sick and let's say dying at home, I notice that the animals often don't leave their side. Something Sammy Winemaker also talked about is that the animals become almost like the partner, like in terms of the sickness, and they don't leave the side of the person who's ill.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I believe it. It's not only just when a person is ill, though. We talked about when they're sad, and I hear from people when they talk about how much their pet means to them, and it's because that the pet was there when they went through a divorce, or the pet was there when they lost their father, and the pet has been with them through so many important stages in life, that they're just they hold all these secrets. You can whisper your feelings and they can see you on your worst day and you can cry to them, and they don't hold it against you. So they are there for you. They really are.
This is what I mean when I see you. I know. It's like my husband sent you here to talk to me about this because he really wants a dog.
Yeah.
So we know that human beings experience a lot of grief when their pets are sick, when they get a cancer diagnosis or like say kidney disease or something in cats. But I also want to talk to you about the grief that animals can feel, because I've read a lot about it, and I know that animals can also feel a sense of grief,
Yes.
not just when their owners are sick, but let's say when there's another pet in the house and that pet passes away or gets sick and has to go to the veterinary hospital. Can you speak to us about that?
Sure. So one of the benefits, I think, of being able to provide in-home euthanasia services is that the other pet in the house, I call them their buddy, the buddy can be there. And, we don't force them to be in the room, but very often they are there. Sometimes with cats, I find they're, at the periphery of the room, and then they'll come in after the pet has passed. But certainly with the dogs, I mean, they're right beside their buddy during the time of the euthanasia. And then after, people notice a difference. Their behaviors are different. Sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way. I remember someone telling me a story about the buddy dog never was allowed in the boat, for example. And then when that first dog passed, all of a sudden that buddy dog was like in their boat all the time. And they used to think that the dog didn't like it, but they realized it was their first dog that was not allowing the second dog in the boat. Sometimes we hear that the buddy dog is just wanting so much more affection and attention because their friend's not there anymore. So they certainly feel the loss and they can show it. And so it's usually in the way that they want a little bit more attention.
So I find it's fascinating. It's so interesting. I don't know if you know, but I studied Buddhism in school. And in Buddhism, there's a whole bunch of sutras called the Jataka tales.
Okay.
And it's the past lives of the Buddha. And in the Buddha's past lives, he was often an animal. And these stories about animals are super heroic. And the animals demonstrate intense compassion and generosity. And it just got me thinking that often animals do behave better than us in terms of like showing up and the unconditionality of their love. I just wanted to talk to you about that and the empathy. Just like it almost feels like animals just have a capacity for empathy, or maybe sometimes they don't. And it's like human beings. Some human beings are born with a higher propensity towards empathy, and others are born with less of a propensity. Do you ever see that with animals? Like that, are some animals like more empathetic, or do you think they all just have this kind of compassion gene?
Oh, good question. I would say it's probably there. And then there are different layers that are put on top that can sort of block it out a little bit, maybe. And so, I suppose if pets are, living on the street, they're going to just act a little differently than the pets that are sort of, in the lap of luxury in someone's home. But I think at the bottom, at the root of all of them, the pets are good. Like, again, you need to get a dog, but yeah, I really think that they're good. And again, it comes down to this unconditional love. They don't care if you've showered, they don't care if you're wearing, makeup, they don't care if you're stinky. Like they just want to be there and give you love. And that is a great feeling for people, especially in this day and age where people are staying away from each other. And there's, when I came in and I said, "Can I hug you?" A lot of people aren't doing that anymore, but you can go home and hug your pet and, they love it.
One of the things I was thinking about is during COVID, a lot of seniors were so isolated and they had no contact, like in nursing homes or in all kinds of different forums, right? And I think that animals like became like the connection, the only connection that a lot of seniors had. And I would talk to certain people and they would say, thank God for my dog, because like no one else is touching me.
Yeah.
And I think that is just so profound, like the connection that animal and I guess the comfort that animals can bring to people.
For sure. It's a reason for people to get up in the morning. I've heard it from many people. For people that live by themselves, it's a reason they get up in the morning and get themselves dressed and out the door. It's to take their dog out for a walk. Or sometimes it's the only person that they're talking to during the day. If you live by yourself and you come home at the end of the day, you may not utter a word. But if you have a cat that is sitting there meowing at you for food, you're going to have a full conversation with the cat about what's for dinner and why aren't you eating and let's go sit here and what are we going to watch? And it's a whole relationship that you can have, and it's pretty incredible.
You make a good case. It's really solid. I want to talk to you about your quality of life assessment. So you have that online, and I think it's super cool of you that you make it available to anyone. So anyone could go on your website. What is your website?
It's mmvhs.ca.
Okay, and then people can access this quality of life assessment and they can answer a series of 14 questions, is it?
Yeah.
So 14 questions that can allow them to assess what the quality of life is of their pet, because often people are in denial. Like
Yes.
people are in denial about the health of their loved ones, like human beings, but also in denial often about their pets. Tell us about the quality of life assessment.
Yeah, so the quality of life assessment, I've actually been using it for about 10 years. I took some other quality of life assessments that were available online, and I sort of put together what I thought would be the most helpful for the type of practice and service that I was providing for families. And this was the scale that we were bringing into the homes to do these consultations. So we've been using this for about 10 years, and all my doctors use it. And so I started using it because I was a little fed up with hearing from families that they were told by their regular veterinarians, don't worry, you'll know when it's time. You'll know when it's time to say goodbye. You'll know when it's time to euthanize, or, and I just thought that's not very helpful information, because I don't think that everybody will know. And so what do you base that on? Do you base it on whether your pet is eating? Do you base it on whether or not they're having diarrhea? Like, what are you basing it on? And so I put together these 14 different categories. And on the website, I've made it really user friendly for people. And so they can go through each of these categories and assess how their pet is doing and come up with a percentage at the end of it. It's a helpful tool. It doesn't mean that you have to, book a euthanasia appointment if your pet scores poorly, but it's really meant to be a conversation starter with families, a conversation starter with your regular vet or your hospice vet, and to really help you to understand where your pet is, how they're doing. What does this mean? And so I think it's a great tool. I even used it myself for Smudge way back when. And, with her, she had been scoring about 72% for quite some time. She was old, she had some issues, but, I could still honestly say her quality of life was really good. 72%, great. The 2 days before I euthanized her, it had dropped to 55%. And then the night before I euthanized her, it was 47%. And that was huge for me to see it right in front of me, instead of just saying, oh yeah, she doesn't look so good. I mean, I could assess each of these categories, and I knew, and I euthanized her the next day.
It allowed you to probably be more objective in a
Absolutely.
situation where you were highly emotional because you were
sure.
so attached to Smudge.
For sure. So, we recommend it all the time to people. Just to have a sense of sort of how their pets are doing. And sometimes they're pleasantly surprised that they thought their pet was not doing very well, but they scored pretty well. And that's very reassuring to people as well.
How is it for you? Are you still practicing euthanasia in the
Yes.
home? I know you have a lot of different vets working under you. For you to do a euthanasia on a pet that you don't know, because I'm imagining you're probably brought in quite late into the process, so you don't know these pets very well.
Yes.
Versus doing a euthanasia on Smudge. Like how is that for you? Like how was that to do that to Smudge, whom you loved so much?
I mean, it's always very sad. Whether it's my own pet or someone else's pet, the situation is very sad. Obviously, it is very different when it is your own pet. And, people say to me all the time, like, how do you do this? Meaning when, I show up to their door, they open the door, they look at me and say, you have the worst job in the world. How do you do this? And I think, I have such a wonderful job, and I'm so honored to be there, to be able to allow this pet to be surrounded by love in their home, to say goodbye. It's beautiful. But it's obviously sad. But when it was my own pet, yeah, it was heartbreaking to say goodbye to her. But I knew that, one of the things I think about and say all the time is, after a good life, a pet deserves a good death, and I could provide that. And so I knew I was doing what was best. I was heartbroken, but in a way, I felt good that I could do this and I could be there. My brother and sister came over. We had a toast with amaretto, which is sort of a family tradition, and it was just a beautiful way to say goodbye to her.
There's such a taboo in our society against death, but one of the things that really resonates with what you just said for me is that death can be very beautiful, and everyone dies. Like, that's a part of living, is dying. One of the things that really resonates with me about what you said is that death can be beautiful. Talk to me a little bit about the beauty of dying with dignity.
I do think that it can be really beautiful, especially when the family is surrounding the pet. I recently performed an in-home euthanasia for friends of mine, and they had a beautiful older golden retriever, and the entire family was just huddled around this dog who was lying in their family room. And I actually grabbed somebody's phone to take pictures because it's a picture of love. Um, and and that to me is beautiful. And yes, it's sad, but to have everybody there were tears, there was laughter. I mean, it was just such a beautiful time for the family to be together and to shower love on this dog, but to one another as well.
That is beautiful, because not all human beings have that opportunity to die surrounded by so much love. A lot of people die alone, right? And that breaks my heart. But I remember once I went to the hospital with my husband. He cut his finger really badly and he needed stitches. And we were at Mount Sinai in Toronto, and we were in the intake line. And there was an elderly woman in front of us, and I couldn't help but overhearing. I have really good hearing, and a lot of empaths have really good hearing.
Interesting.
And I heard them ask her, "Who is your emergency contact?" And she said, "I don't have one." And I just, like, my heart just fell into my stomach. And then when it was our turn to go up to do the intake process, I said to the intake worker, I couldn't help but overhear what you just said to that woman.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people say that they don't have emergency contact? She's like, "I can't tell you how often I hear that." So it's like we have to be so grateful, right, to be surrounded by that. And I think it's such a beautiful thing for a pet, an animal, who's a family member, to have that kind of passing right to the other side, to be surrounded by that much love. Like, I would wish that for every human being as well.
For sure. Sometimes people think they wonder if they should be present when their pet passes. If it's a planned euthanasia, they feel like it's going to be so sad. I don't know if I could do it. And I, not that I try and talk them out of not being there, but I kind of do, because I feel that they owe it to their pet to be there, and I think that they will regret not being there if they just think, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be crying. Well, of course you're going to be sad and crying. But I think it's so important to be there for the pet and for the owner. And it's just such a dog.
Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful time to thank your pet for just the love they have given you.
I agree. I think it's the same with human beings.
Right.
But people are so scared of death. There's such a fear around death. So a dog came up here. So maybe you can answer this question. I often have the door open, but even when I have the door closed, dogs are very attracted to this space. So do you think that there's a reason? Do you think it's the smell or the...
It's smell. I
Okay.
mean,
Is it me?
No. Well, if it is, that's a good thing.
Just
Are you
curious.
hiding liver in your pockets?
Definitely not. Total vegetarian here.
Listen, maybe if there were dogs that came, then the next set of dogs come, which means the next set of dogs come. And they're so driven by smell. So
Also, I wanted to ask you, when I was a little kid, I was sort of like bitten, not terrible, but on the leg. So I had a fear of dogs growing up. And now I have some trepidation around dogs, but I really like them. When I'm around dogs, they love coming up to me. Is it because they're sensing that I have the trepidation, or what's that about?
I think so. It's always the people that are allergic or, a little nervous. The dogs are just all over.
They gravitate towards.
They do. And again, it probably comes down to some, smell, pheromones, something that they're picking up on that is just maybe they're trying to win you over.
Maybe. Could be.
Oh, I should, can we back up? I want to
Yeah.
say something.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about people's fear of dying and the unknown that happens with death, I started doing TikToks. And yeah, so not really my thing, but I am actually enjoying it. But they're all just me talking. And so one of the ones that I've done recently has had thousands and thousands and thousands of views.
Okay.
And the topic was, what does natural death look like in pets? And so, I think that it's not something that people talk about. It's not something that veterinarians necessarily talk about because as veterinarians, we want to fix, we want to help, we want to cure. And so it's just that constant sort of pushing forward. And I'm not sure that everybody is actually prepared for what does death look like if your pet were to die at home. And so people have been so curious about this, and the comments have all been so sort of positive and appreciative because now they have a little bit of a better understanding of, what it looks like, not to fear it, and to be accepting if that is what is going to happen. And so I think it's just sort of um, relaxed their fears about what can happen.
And you're almost normalizing that experience
Yeah.
for them. So what are the first signs like for people to look out for?
There's so many things, but really, the things that people will tend to see is, they may not eat. It depends what the underlying disease is, really, that is the reason for the death. But it could be things like them not eating and drinking. And again, not just one day, but you're going on a couple of days now. Often they want to move themselves away, whether it's hiding or just sort of moving away from family. They don't want to be held anymore. And then changes in their breathing. And those are sort of the things that, death is imminent.
Okay.
When the breathing issues
When
start.
should someone call you? At what point?
So I find people call us a little late. Usually, they're usually finding us through their regular vet. They're being referred to us because they've asked the veterinarian, when the time comes, or, when my pet is declining, will you come to our home? And most regular vets don't do it routinely to leave the practice to go do an in-home euthanasia. And so they're calling us usually the day before or the day of is when people call. Certainly, I tell people not to wait until you are having an emergency. And again, one of the other TikToks that I did was the title of it is Better a Month Too Early Than a Day Too Late. And again, that resonated with a lot of people, and people were feeling guilty that they, maybe did it too early, or guilty that they did it too late. And so there's so much emotion wrapped up in all of this. But
I think that's an interesting lead into the question I had for you next, which was, you're a doctor. You're a doctor for animals. However, when you go into a home, you're dealing with a whole family. So how much of your process is dealing with the animal, and then how much is dealing with the family, the children, the adults? Like, is a lot of your work focused on the healing process and the grieving process with them?
Yes. So my dad is a psychiatrist, and I always sort of joke that, I learned by osmosis, and I feel very much like a therapist in a way. I mean, when I do the consultations in the home or the telemedicine appointments, families don't always agree on anything. And so, caring for their pet at the end is also something that they don't often agree on. And so it's, asking the tough questions to them, and, getting people to open up about their feelings and their fears and their goals. So that's a big part of it. And then when we're talking about the in-home euthanasia point, again, it's just talking to them about how they're going to feel, how they feel, their feelings of guilt, their feelings of anger, and, just all the emotions that are associated with grieving. And so I talk to them about that to help normalize and just let them understand, what they're feeling is how they should be feeling. And you're not crazy, that you see your pet, after they've passed. And but yeah, a lot of it is talking to the family and helping the family to understand how they're feeling, how their pet is feeling. But certainly we try and put the pet at the forefront.
Sure. No, for sure. I totally understand that. So when you came in, we were talking about one of the new services that you just started, which is called Aquamation. Tell us about that.
Sure. So with the families that we are helping for the in-home euthanasia service, we wanted to be able to continue the care of their pet throughout their end-of-life journey. And so I started a service, which, as you said, is called Aquamation, and people are probably thinking, what is that? It is water-based cremation. And so it's an eco-friendly form of aftercare. It's similar to cremation in that after the process, we are able to return the pet's ashes back to the family. And so that is a service that we started in the city of Toronto. We're the first doing it in Toronto, and we're providing it to our families that we're caring for through our Midtown Mobile Veterinary Hospice Services practice, but it's certainly open to any families in and around the GTA as well.
And just describe it a little bit. So you use water instead of fire in order to cremate the body of the pet.
That's really what it is. It's about a 20-hour process. The pet is, it's 95% water and 5% alkali salt, temperature and flowing water. It's in a special machine that was brought in from the US. And after 20 hours, when the machine is opened in each individual compartment where the pets have been placed individually, we are left with their bones, and the bones are processed. They're dried and then processed to make the ashes.
And people can take the ashes home with them?
Yep, we have an engraver on site, and we have urns and custom urns that we can do as well. And so the pets are placed in the urn of the owner's choice and returned to the owner. We do ink paw prints, we do nose ink prints, we do clay paw prints. Some people want fur clippings, whisker clippings, like all these little things that just help people remember and have sort of a part of their pet with them.
I once heard you talk about bucket lists for pets. I forgot to ask you about that. I just thought that that was really interesting.
So bucket lists, I mean, you can go online and you'll see different posts about people doing bucket lists for their pets. And so if you know, for example, that your dog has cancer and, you know, they are nearing the end, they're not quite there, but they're getting there, and you know you have about a week or so left, then you might say, okay, we're going to go to, you know, Burger Shack to get a hamburger, and, you know, go down to Baskin Robbins for ice cream. And like, I want my dog to try chocolate. You know, chocolate is toxic to dogs, but at the end, you know, you want them to have some chocolate. So, or, you know, seeing people from their youth and going down to the ocean and things like that. So there are a lot of things that people can do and just make it special and take pictures along the way. It's just a little last adventure, which is kind of fun and
I think it's
meaningful.
beautiful, actually.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
It really is beautiful. What do you think we can learn from animals, from your position as a palliative care doctor for animals? What do you think one of the things that we can take away from this is in terms of empathy and just our own evolution as humans?
I love the non-judgmental part of pets. Again, you know, I referred to, they don't care if you've showered, they don't care what shoes you're wearing. You know, they just want to be loved and touched. So I think the loving part and the unconditional love part is so important. And just to be a friend. You know, they're up for anything. You want to go for a walk? Let's go to the walk for a walk. You want to go in the pool? Let's go in the pool. Like you want to sit and watch Netflix all night? Sure. They're up for anything, and they're just great companions and great friends. And I think that that's really wonderful.
What do you think we can learn from animals, especially from your perspective as a palliative care physician? What can we learn from them to be better human beings?
I think we can learn to show up for people. You know, pets are always there, they're present, they're ready for fun and action. If you want to sit on a couch all night and watch television and eat popcorn, they're ready for it. If you want to go for a walk down at the beach, they're ready for it. They're ever loving, and they are great companions. And I think that would be a great quality in a person.
One of the things I've heard you mention in the past was the non-judgmentalism of animals. Because as humans, we could be quite judgmental, right? And I always try to encourage people when I teach empathy classes to judge favorably. But pets just do that naturally. They judge favorably.
They're perfect companions.
Friends.
They are. I mean, they are man's best friend or women's best friend. Yeah, they really are. They are there, they are present, and they rely on us to do right by them.
Could you ever see yourself as a doctor for humans? Or
No,
oh no, you
No.
made like a face like, oh.
no, definitely not. But it works vice versa, I'm sure. I mean, I would think that many humans would say like, yeah, I cannot do, what you do with animals. But no, I never had any interest in human medicine. I really enjoyed, medicine and science and biology when I was younger, but it was never with a thought or idea of going into human medicine.
Interesting. You're just a lover of animals from the earliest age.
Yeah,
It's in your blood.
it is.
So now, what do you have at home?
We have 2 Bernese Mountain Dogs.
You're a Bernese Mountain Dog girl.
I love them.
Is that common for people to gravitate towards one breed?
Yeah. It's funny because some people will say, I had this breed and I feel like I'm replacing that pet if I get another one. But we love the personality of a Bernese Mountain Dog. I'm wearing white pants, so I had to like put the pants on and leave my house very quickly because it is a lot of black hair.
One of my
we love
closest
them.
friends also loves Bernese Mountain Dogs. And one of the sad parts, just because I witnessed with her, she lost the pet because they don't live that long, Bernese Mountain Dogs. But she has like the most incredible connection, with her. His name was Shakespeare. I told you about Shakespeare.
Yes, I
And now she has
remember.
a Liberty. And Shakespeare was such a beautiful, beautiful dog.
Yeah, they are wonderful. Listen, they're all wonderful. We happen to love, the personality and the size, and our dogs are just so loving. They're very needy, but they're very loving. And so, I mean, Smudge lived to 14, so that was pretty amazing. We have Maple now, and she's 8.5, and Elsie is 1.
One of the things that I've heard you talk about is that you've euthanized one of your pets, Smudge, but you've also had the experience where you didn't have your medical bag because you were up at the cottage and you had to witness the natural death of your beloved dog.
Yeah.
And so you've experienced both the natural death of a pet and giving your pet a death with dignity. Talk to us about that experience.
Yeah, so our little Chihuahua, who was also about 14, passed away very suddenly last summer at our cottage. And she had heart issues. She was on medication. It was very well controlled. And at 11 o'clock that night, I let her out and she peed and she ran up the stairs and went into my son's room to bed, which was the nightly routine. So everything seemed fine. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, she was in my bed and I woke up because I could see she was acting a little differently and breathing differently. And I knew this was it. And so I picked her up and I went into the other room and, turned on the lights and just sort of prepared myself. And it was terrible. I'm going to get emotional. It was really hard to watch, actually. Oh, God. It was hard to watch.
She was suffering.
Yeah. And it took about 2 hours for her to pass. And I wish I had my bag.
How long would it have taken if you had your bag?
And she would have been sedated within minutes. And so she wouldn't have been aware of what was happening to her. And she would have been relaxed instead of stressed, which she was.
Did you just hold her at that point?
I held her, but there were times she didn't want to be held. So it was hard. It was hard.
I don't want to end on a sad note. I
Ugh.
But
Yeah, it was terrible.
it's so
It
so
was
emotional
really,
because I think a lot of people think like giving a pet a natural death is the more compassionate thing to do,
no,
right? Not
it
to
is not.
intervene.
But, you know, in this situation, I couldn't have done anything because like my thought was, do I put her in my car and go to an emergency clinic? She would have died on the way there. I knew I had to just be there and be present. Um, if I had, but like for a regular person, for that to happen, they couldn't get someone to come to their house at 1 o'clock in the morning to euthanize their pet. So someone else would have had to have the same thing. And I didn't know she was going to die that night. But it's not pleasant to watch.
Did that change you as a veterinarian to witness that?
It reassured me that providing a planned in-home euthanasia is a beautiful, peaceful, stress-free experience for the pet and the owner. It was very difficult to watch her decline so fast and then to pass. And maybe for me also, because I know I have these tools usually, to not be able to provide that for her was probably an extra jab in my heart that I couldn't do what I do.
Thank you so much for talking to us and for sharing just the amazing work that you do. I always find talking to you is so inspiring. And again, I think I have to get a dog now after talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.